I'm John Beaudin, and here is our entire interview just from a few days ago with one of the greatest drummers of all time, a man who certainly influenced most of the cats playing behind the kit today, one way or another, whether they know it or not. And if you look at a current clip of this guy playing drums, you'll be in awe of the fact that he plays with the vigor and the speed of maybe a 20-year-old. He's still doing it. The drummer from Asia, but more importantly, the drummer for Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Here's our interview with the great Carl Palmer. This is Rock History Book.
So, okay, getting off the road. How do you come down after? I was just showing my son yesterday about the energy that you've got. How do you come down from that after such a successful tour?
I don't think that it's that interesting as a question, to be honest with you. Everyone's different. I just relax for a few days and then I'm back up again. It's as simple as that, really. No big secret. There's no magic potions. It's just the way it is.
When I was reading in the book, and it's really nice that you have 3 editions of the book, I was reading the fact that you had that thing at Christmas. You didn't think you were going to get that drum kit you saw, and your mother made you think you were getting chocolates, but at the end you did. Can you still go into that kid's body and remember that time you got that kit, that red kit?
Yeah, I can. It was a surprise. It was set up in the front bedroom of the house, and she asked me to get something out of the bedroom, and I walked up and picked it up, and there it was, set up in the middle of the floor, and I was deliriously happy. That's for sure. And
a couple of weeks later, you get to see Gene Krupa on the big screen.
Yeah, I get to see him on the big screen, and then I think a couple of weeks after that, I had some lessons.
Did you? There's those defining moments we all talk about that changed the trajectory of your life. That's certain. Those 2 things coming back to back like that. Was there no going back after that?
I think it was kind of natural. I mean, if you've ever read anything about me, you'll know that I'm from quite a strong musical background, a family, a lot of musicians. So it was in the family anyway. It was either you were going to work in one of the retail shops or you were going to be a musician. And I tried both, and I ended up being a musician.
All the albums that you guys put together and the amount of work that it takes. I remember it was, I think it was Greg that said, by the time I joined this band, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I was already somewhat of an old man. I think sometimes fans forget the amount of work and sacrifice that it takes by the time you get to know a band for you guys to play at that level on that first album. Don't you think fans don't know? They don't need to know that, but you guys know that, how much work it took to get into to hit the ground running on that first album.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say hit the ground running. I mean, it was a success for sure. But that's just due to circumstance, timing, what we were doing. I mean, there's a lot attached to that, not just what the individuals sort of really brought to the table. And it was the beginning of prog rock. Yeah. And we were some of the front runners of that particular art form. So we were first in, as they say.
But did you know that at the time? I mean, the thing was when we talk to musicians all the time, say, hey, did you know you'd still be doing this at 50 or 60 or 70? And no one in their 20s thinks about being 50, 60 or 70.
I didn't have any doubt at all I'd still be doing this at my age. I didn't come into the business to become a rock star. I didn't come into the business to make money. I didn't come into the business for fame. As I told you earlier, I come from a long line of musicians. And basically, we were just interested in playing and being able to make a living. Fortunately enough, I've made a great living and been very successful and been in numerous bands that have had #1, from The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Atomic Rooster, Asia, ELP. So I've been very lucky, but not searching for it, searching for it.
Asia was a different type of success, or it was a different ilk of a band. Were there ever people, because it was some ways similar, in some ways very different, came up to you and said, what are you doing? Or did you always know that's what I'm doing?
Well, I mean, you have to understand the music industry changed in the 80s. We had a thing called MTV, VH1, and basically prog rock wasn't getting played on the radio. So the 3 of us, John Wetton, Steve Howe, myself, had to make some radical changes, which we did. And we thought, well, maybe we'll go, a more commercial route, dare I say, which we did go, and it was successful, thank God. And we'll try and incorporate as much prog rock as we possibly can. And we did with Wildest Dreams and Time Again and things like this. But they were short pieces. It was a changing of the time. And we went with it, and it worked for the first album. It worked remarkably well.
Tarkus, you talk about sophomore jinx. A lot of bands have that. I mean, I was talking to the guys in Toto many times through the years where even they had admit, oh, we didn't really have two great albums back to back. We had great albums, but we didn't have great albums. But with like you guys in 71, and it's turning 50 years old, of course, as you know. What was the atmosphere going into Tarkus?
The atmosphere going into Tarkus was pretty grim. Greg didn't like it. That's been written many times again. Mm-hmm. He ended up loving it. It became a blueprint for many groups to follow. It was a concept. Never really understood the concept myself, but the music is absolutely fantastic. And it really was the third album, because we'd recorded the first album followed by the live album Pictures at an Exhibition by Mussorgsky. So this was all a developing sort of like period, really. The atmosphere was good, and it was received incredibly well in Europe and quite well in America, I have to say.
Your tour has been well received, and I like the fact that you included 21st Century Schizoid Man. It's a nice. I mean, there's a lot of tips of the hat to Keith and the band in general, but to include that was, like, to me, a cherry on top.
Well, it was just a fun. I always try to give the people a real insight to how the band started. And it cover as much material as possible. And that just happened to be a piece we first played, which amazed me then, and it still amazes me today. I know why it happened now, but there you go. We never really played it as a complete piece. We just played segments of it. We play all of it with my band, but yeah, it's part of the history of ELP, because that's where we started, really. Mm-hmm. As I say, I was quite amazed that Keith wanted to go along with that, because it was King Crimson, and he was from the Nice, so we could have chosen something from the Nice. We could have chosen something from Atomic Rooster, but we chose that piece. Very strange. With
Works Volume 1, and I get it. I mean, I read in the book, the fact that was an area that you weren't that interested in going in, and it was an expensive, an expensive detour after brain salad surgery.
You talking about the orchestra?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't against the orchestra. I actually recorded on Works 1 a concerto for percussion, which was with a full symphonic orchestra. So I wasn't against it. What I was concerned about was the fact that we would have to tour with them. And would that be the right thing to do after being away for so long? In hindsight, it wasn't. But nevertheless, we put the orchestra together. We wanted to go out and play. We recorded a great album at Montreal Olympic Stadium. The rest is history. So it worked, but it didn't work for the full 6 weeks.
Oh, what was that deal with Rod Stewart when you guys were supposed to go on stage and they kept having a good time, which, when in Rome, the rock stars do that?
I think that was at the Mari Soul Festival, I believe. Okay, so we asked them if they'd like to go on first, or they'd like to go on second. And they said something like, we'll go on second. So we said, okay, we'll go on first. We were about to go on, and they walked out and started playing. And we thought they were going to go on after us. So we just turned up and played louder than them, and they had to leave their stage. It was just really ugly. I think there was a lot of alcohol in.
What was the criteria for you guys? I mean, obviously they bring in tunes and you'd bring in ideas, but when you heard a song, would you go back? Would you play it there? Would you come up with the idea? Because you've come up as a drummer, you would come up with thousands of things that I would never have thought.
It depends, if you take Tarkus, I mean, the actual theme, Tarkus, the actual time signature and where the accents are, where the melody falls, it is what I gave to Keith. And then Keith wrote a melody on top of that rhythmical accented pattern. As far as Greg's concerned, he'd have 3 or 4 chords for a song. And he might not have a middle 8, and he'd walk in with that, and we'd all listen to it and do the best job we could on it, to improve it for him. That's just how we worked. If I ever came in with anything that was worthy, let's say part of Tank or whatever, then I would work with Keith on that, and we'd develop it accordingly. So that's how it went, really. There was no hard and fast rule. Whoever had the best material, and we just have to take our hats off and say, that's a great piece, we should be going for yours. That's how we did it.
With brain salad surgery and HR Giger, I mean, we say Giger in North America. I'm not sure how you guys say it, but what was your reaction to that album cover? You say Geiger?
Geiger. The reaction to the album cover was, Yeah, pretty good. I mean, it wasn't made for us. It wasn't designed for us.
Yeah.
It just happened to be in his house at the time when we went through, and it was something we weren't going to do. Actually, we were going to. I think we had a day off, and we were going somewhere for a lunch that day. And Peter Zumsteak, the promoter, said, "Why don't you see this local sort of Swiss artist who's really good? He's on the way." It was sort of about 20 minutes out of the way. So we said, fine. We dropped by, and he got some amazing things in the property, pieces of artwork, and this was one of them. So we just chose it then and there.
I think it's normal to see a drummer, slow down as he gets older, and everyone thinks, "Oh, you're going to slow down." But seeing your more recent things, how do you keep? I mean, do you have a practice regimen? How do you keep playing that strongly, that fast?
Well, first of all, I don't drink. I've never drunk a pint of beer or a lager. I mean, I have the occasional glass of wine. I've never smoked cigarettes. Yes, I have taken drugs. No, I don't take drugs anymore. No, I haven't taken drugs for about 40, maybe 50 years. So there's no other real secret to it than that, to be honest with you. I was a vegan for 11 years. I now still eat a plant-based diet, but I eat a little bit of fish because I need the omega-3. And basically, I'm just keen on good health, because without good health, I can't play the way I would like to play. So I have a philosophy, if I will carry on playing and being as enthusiastic about things as I am, as long as I'm improving. If I can't improve, but I will, and I am improving, my feet are getting better, believe it or not. If I can't improve, but I can maintain, I'm still here, I'm going to stay. If I can't maintain my standard, I'm gone.
Yeah, Bill Bruford told me a couple of years ago, he said what he had in his head wasn't coming out of his body. And he said that was his cue. And everyone has a different line in the sand, of course.
I think everyone's got a different perspective on it. The thing is that, it's, when you start off, when you're 11 years old and you decide you want to do something, and you're doing it just for the sake of doing it because you want to do this, I think you have a different perspective. Most guys that I've met that came into the business after working in an architect's office or working here or working there or doing whatever, ended up not coming into it for the right reasons. Yes, they had good reasons when they were in there, but they didn't have that magnet that sort of kept them in there. Regarding Bill Bruford, he's done incredibly well. He's got a doctor of philosophy or music or whatever he is, and he's done very, very well. And he played very well whilst he was around, and he was successful. So maybe for him there was a challenge. I still find a challenge there, and it's the challenge that keeps you at the end of the day.
Right. There's different thoughts of both prog fans. I remember when I first started writing, they were going, "Who's this guy? How dare he interview Steve Hackett?" And all that. Prog fans are a little different. They're wired a little different, but I like that about them. Whenever you get something that's poppy, like Lucky Man, for instance, coming right out of the gate, when we did a top 30 after Keith passed of ELP songs, Lucky Man was number 2. And there was all those guys who were going, "Oh, how can that be?" I'm going, well, Lucky Man's Lucky Man, man. It speaks for itself. But they are wired a little different, prog fans. I'm one of them.
The thing is that basically all of you sort of really got it wrong, because we never gave ourselves the prog label. It was given to us.
Yeah.
Our music is quite eclectic. Let's just look at what there is there. Number one, we don't have a guitar in the band, or we didn't. Greg played very little lead guitar, more rhythm guitar, with the acoustic songs. We played classical adaptations. We were keyboard driven. We played love songs. We played a little bit of rock, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of folk. We were eclectic. And the fact that they called us prog was because we were using the latest instruments of the day, the Moog synthesizer, the Mini Moog, the GX1, and so forth. So, when you say Emerson, Lake and Palmer's a prog band, that's a bit limiting. I mean, Dream Theater's a prog band. That's a prog band. Emerson, Lake and Palmer weren't a prog band. We just appeared to be one when you heard things like Tarkus. But if you think of Footprints in the Snow, C'est la Vie, From the Beginning, Still You Turn Me On, Lucky Man, these aren't prog pieces.
Let's just say you're in a situation where you're in a doctor's office and someone looks at you. I'm just kind of curious, as a man-to-man thing. Someone looks at you and thinks you look a little familiar, or else someone says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What do you tell them?
I tell them I'm a musician.
But the next question is, do you do anything that I would know? I mean, it must have come up. I'm curious.
Yes. And I say, well, yes, it's quite possible. You might have heard of this, or you might have heard of that. You have to understand that more people today will know of Asia than they'll know of ELP. And the reason being is that demographic is old. The ELP demographic is quite old. Yes, we are into second generations. Yes, we are into third generations of ELP fans, but they're smaller. They're smaller, where the Asia demographic is kind of still there, because that was 80s. That was 30 years ago. Some of them are like 50 now, 60 maybe. So they probably would remember. They wouldn't remember me. They would remember the song or a song.
Did your parents, after the success, again, with both, were your parents around? And pardon my ignorance, because I don't know when you had success.
My parents were around during the ELP days. They weren't. My mother was around during the beginning of the Asia success. They were there to see the big ELP success. That's for sure. Yeah.
How does that change around you, though? This is a question I ask everyone, because the fans seem to really be intrigued by this. You hit success, all of a sudden, you're still the same guy. You still have the little kid that was always inside of you. But how did your friends in general react to the fact that you were touring all around the world? Did they act differently? Did you lose friends? Did you gain? I mean, how did that work?
To be honest with you, I never really had a lot of, I'd never stayed in my hometown. I left home when I was 16. So the friends that I had were musicians I played with. So when I became successful, they just said, good luck to you. We're really pleased that you're doing well. It wasn't a case of the guy down the street is envious of me because of this or that. It didn't work that way then. It wasn't that way. Not for me anyway.
I'm not sure if it was you or one of the other guys who had mentioned that if there was a guitarist, if there was someone that had the same vision, or another musician in general that had the same vision, he would have been in that band, but that just somehow never happened, right?
We didn't really look, although people all think we did, but there wasn't any. There are more guitar players now that could fill that role. If you look at the period of time during that period, keyboard players there were plenty of great keyboard players. And there were some great guitar players, but they were all blues based. If you look now, there's many great, guitar players who do the gothic shred like Yngwie Malmsteen, and, Paul Bielatowicz, plays all that classical stuff. He's in my band. We didn't have those guys back then. So if those guys were around, they possibly would have been in the band, but it wasn't something we were searching. One of my main reasons for joining the band was I wanted to be in a trio. I'd been in a trio with Chris Farlow, the soul singer, when he couldn't afford a brass section. I'd been in a trio with The Crazy World of Arthur Brown when we had the #1 hit. Atomic Rooster was a trio, and I really only wanted to step into a trio. So ELP, the three of us, that was what it was for me. So I wouldn't have been keen even if Jimi Hendrix did want to join, to be honest with you, though I think he's a great guitar player.
Travels in Tour fan asks, this is going to be a great chat. Please ask Carl about the famous stainless steel drum kit. I seem to recall it was purchased from Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr picked it up. It then got sold again in New York City, and it now belongs to a very good friend of mine, actually, called David Frangione, who runs a company called Audio One. And David was a great engineer and still is, and I'd worked with people like Aerosmith, Kiss, you name it. And he's actually been working on some stuff for me. He's become a real good friend. So that's David Frangione.
When ELP was riding high, were there drummers out there that you were listening to? Did you have time, or were you too busy being the best you can with yourself?
I listen to drummers nearly every other day, and I write notes down of things that I pick up. That's how you get good. It's when that interest sort of wanes that it's difficult. But for me, at the time, we were very busy, so I didn't have YouTube then. If I'd had YouTube, it would have made life a lot easier. So let's just say that I give YouTube a good 2 hours every 3 weeks, every month, just looking at who are the latest drummers, what's the latest stuff that's coming about, just so I know. And then, I might do it every other day for a week, at some stage. If I'm just like today, I was on here. I must have looked for about an hour today, just at various stuff. And to be honest with you, I find it such a great educational vehicle. Yeah. And it's one way of, before we'd all get inspired by magazines, but now we can get inspired by seeing, I won't go to a Genesis concert, not because I don't like them. It's just finding the time and all that kind of stuff. But, to be able to pull up a concert or a couple of tracks from a concert and just see how the guys sound is a great thing. And it's a great privilege to be able to do that. And, YouTube brings that to everyone. It's a great learning tool as well.
Yeah. Any plans on recording? I mean, you seem to really fill your cup getting out there
Well, right now we've just released these box sets, the CD box set, the vinyl box set. We've got the ELP book, which is out there. We've got a film project that we're working on with Ted Fields from Radar Music, all about Carnival 9. I'm putting a show together with David Frangioni, believe it or not, trying to introduce Greg and Keith into the set, using live footage of them playing each side of the stage on a huge screen, and me in sync with them, plus Paul and Simon. We've got footage from the Royal Albert Hall, which seems to be working for that. So right now, I'm just trying to celebrate what we've got, which covers the 50th anniversary, which is the first album, which is Pictures, which is Trilogy, Tarkus Trilogy and Brain Salad Surgery. So that's kind of occupied my time. And the book, the book probably took about 6 months this year to do all the editing on it and to get all of that sort of up to speed, because that basically is the group telling the story over those 5 albums via interviews. And some of the interviews weren't good. Some of the interviews were lacking. Some of them needed to be redone when I was re-interviewed to fill in the gaps. And it's turned out really, real good. And the Emerson family joined me. The Lake family joined me. I did everything. I saw everything first. And then once I was happy, we sent it on to them so they didn't have too much to do, so they could just see, if there's anything they wanted to change. There was the occasional thing here and there. That's to be expected. But overall, a great experience.
What's the difference between the 3 different volumes?
Well, all the volumes are basically like the limited edition, which is only 50 of each, have like a glossy artist-proof picture of Keith and in Greg's version, a copy of him. In my version, there's a piece of artwork which I've called the Manticore. The Manticore was the ELP record label we had at one time. So I've called it the Manticore, and that's in there. And that's all constructed with light, actually. It's a long story, but I've got LED drumsticks with little light bulbs, LED lights at the end of the sticks. I'm in a dark room, 12-foot square, 2 cameras. They film me. They film the movement of light, the casting of the shadows, the reflections, the mixture of the colors. And anyway, I created this picture. We called it Manticore. That's in there. The top end version's in a book, in a proper box. The book is in a box. It's leather bound. It's signed by the Emersons, signed by the Lakes and myself. They're all slightly different. And then eventually there will be a paperback version.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your artwork. At what point did that start for you?
1973, I taped a couple of light bulbs to the end of drumsticks with a cable going down to a battery. And I got a guy to just film me miming playing the drums. And the picture was so successful, it went into the Birmingham Mail. So Birmingham is the town that I'm from. And for some unknown reason, it got put in there because it was a classic photo. I've still got the photo. Anyway, roll forward about 40 years, because that was in the 70s. The Chinese started developing drumsticks with little LED lights in the tips of the sticks. No cable. They're all self-generating the minute you pick them up. So I started using them to construct sort of pictures using ELP music. And that's how it started. And I think to date, we've sold about 600 canvases, and we've given just over, something like $43,000 to various charities. So it's been going some time.
I love Beach. And I understand, yes, you guys did look like the Bee Gees, but there's a lot of us diehard fans who bought all the albums no matter what. And I know it was Ahmet Erdogan basically said, go on in there and jam and do that. And by the way, you might get solo albums out of this if you do that. What was the atmosphere going into that album?
Ahmet never said, you might get solo albums out of this. What Ahmet said was basically, you owe it to yourself to go in and try once more. What he didn't understand is that the group was incredibly fatigued. And, to be in somewhere like Nassau, the Bahamas, is not a place to write a prog album. And a prog album shouldn't be called Love Beach. and that kind of cover shouldn't exist. You shouldn't look like the Bee Gees. Nevertheless, there were a couple of good tracks on there. It was really hard work recording down there. I remember going into the studio at Compass Point one day, and I wanted to listen to the track Canario, which is written by Rodriguez. It was a piece of classical music Keith had chosen. We'd recorded it, and I went in there, and the guys had wiped the hi-hat track. And I said, what's going on here? And, it's the way they are there. They're a little bit loose in the Bahamas. And it was hard work. And it wasn't something that we should have really done. We had a reasonable time doing it, but it was over. And we did it just to placate Ahmet Ertegun, to tell you the truth. Very nice man, but it was all over. And it was going to take 12 years before it came back together again. And that's how long it took.
Okay, it was over at that point. At what point, what led to you guys saying, okay, this is it, before you got back together?
Well, we didn't actually say this is it. We just kind of all went to the various countries that we lived in Europe, and that was it. And then nothing really happened after that, because I ended up building a house, and Asia started, and that went through that, and there was problems with that. And Greg actually did the satellite broadcast from Japan when John Wetton was ill, because John Wetton had a drinking problem, God bless him. And it went on from there. And then sort of at the end of the 80s, I had committed to a third album with Geffen Records. And I got approached by Greg Lake, I think it was, said, we want to put it back together again. Can you do it? And I said, yes, of course I can. Well, anyway, to cut a long story short, they wanted me to join immediately. And I couldn't join immediately because I needed at least 4, possibly 6 weeks to finish off the album. I knew there was 4 weeks in there, but one always adds a couple of extra weeks for working in the studio. So I said, I need 6 weeks. And we'd already been off 12 years now, remember. And I don't know what was said. He said, well, we need to start straight away. I said, well, I can't. And so then the next thing was they wanted to get another drummer. So I said, that's fine. If you want to do that, go for Cozy. I know Cozy well. It's better for me if you go out and work and promote all the product we've made together, then you wait for me if you can't. And if you can't, understood, no bad feelings on my side. But, 12 years is 12 years. Another 4 weeks, what difference really would it make? Anyway, they had their mind set. I said, fine, go ahead, do it. And I wish you the very best. And they did. And that's how that worked out, really. And then we got back together as the 3 original members in 91, 92.
Hope you enjoyed that. This is available in 2 forms, in the podcast form, links in the description, and a video. Also links in the description. There's also a whole series of this on our sister channel, which is Rock History Music. We'll have links to that as well. Make sure you buy a t-shirt to help support the channel. You can leave a donation if you like. But more importantly than anything else, share our videos on social media. Comment on them as well. If you haven't subscribed, this is a great time. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Book.